What if I told you that someone actually obtained the private recorded phone calls made from inside a jail cell by a member of one of America's most famous reality TV families? And those calls reveal something far darker than anything that ever aired on television. Not rumors, not tabloid speculation, actual audio. 13 recorded calls from the Washington County Detention Center, capturing a family in full crisis mode, and what they say when they think only their own people are listening is nothing short of chilling. Because here's the thing. This family built an entire empire on the image of wholesome, God-fearing perfection. 19 kids, matching outfits, carefully worded statements, a PR machine so polished it ran for years on national television. But these tapes do not care about the image, and what they reveal is not grief. It is not remorse. It is not a family reckoning with a serious crime. It is a masterclass in control, in manipulation, in protecting the institution at absolutely any cost. And once you hear what is actually on those calls, you will never look at this family the same way again. If this kind of deep dive content is what you are here for, real analysis, real receipts, no fluff, please take 2 seconds right now and hit that like button and subscribe to Jenny Exposes. It genuinely helps this channel keep doing this work, and trust me, we are just getting started. So let's set the scene properly, because context here is everything. Joseph Duggar is arrested on a Wednesday. Now, for a family like this one that has spent decades cultivating a very specific brand of moral authority, a brand so powerful it anchored a reality show for 11 seasons, an arrest is not just a personal crisis. It is an existential one. The entire identity of this family rests on the idea that they are different, that their way of life, their faith, their discipline, their insularity, all of it produces better people, better families, a better world. An arrest shatters that narrative instantly. But here is where it gets truly disturbing. Joseph is arrested on Wednesday. By Friday, the Department of Children and Family Services steps in and removes the children from the home. Now, if you are a normal person processing this sequence of events, Wednesday is your worst day. Wednesday is the day your world falls apart. Wednesday is when you discover the person you built your life with has committed a serious crime. But Kendra Joseph's wife explicitly identifies Friday as her hardest day. Not Wednesday, Friday. The day the children were removed. And when she explains why, she does not talk about fear for the children. She does not express concern for their safety or confusion about what they may have witnessed or experienced. She tells Joseph that on Friday, her purpose was removed from her. Her purpose. She describes her children as the people she was going to pour her life into. And look, on the surface, that might sound like a devoted mother speaking from a place of genuine pain. But when you listen carefully, and these transcripts reward careful listening, what you are actually hearing is a woman who has been so thoroughly conditioned to define her entire identity through her role as a mother that she cannot separate her children's well-being from her own sense of self. She is not grieving for them. She's grieving for her own identity. And that distinction matters enormously, because it tells you everything about how this crisis is being processed inside the bubble. The children are not independent human beings whose safety is the central concern. They are extensions of her, vessels almost. And their removal is experienced not as a protective intervention, but as an amputation of her own purpose. That framing does a very specific thing psychologically. It removes the focus entirely from why the children were removed in the first place. It erases the actual victim. And it repositions Kendra as the one who has been wronged. This is not accidental. This is a pattern. And it runs through every single one of these 13 recorded calls. When the family rallies around Joseph after his arrest, the language they use is extraordinarily revealing. Kendra relays messages from family members, and this is almost hard to believe when you first hear it, telling him that they are disappointed but still love him. Disappointed, as if he forgot to take out the trash, as if he missed a family dinner, as if he made a poor financial decision, not as if he committed a serious, severe crime with a real victim whose life has been irrevocably affected. The word disappointed is doing an enormous amount of work in that message. It is a calculated minimization. And minimization in the psychology of abusive systems is one of the most powerful tools available because it does not require anyone to outright lie. You just shrink the thing. You reduce it. You quietly, consistently strip it of its actual weight until the people inside the system start to genuinely believe the smaller version is the real version. And the effect of that kind of sustained minimization over time is that the abuser is protected not through denial, but through redefinition. Now, here is where the legal dimension kicks in, and it is equally striking. Shortly after his arrest, Joseph actually confesses, not to the media, not in a press statement. He confesses to the victim's father in a recorded police call. That confession exists. It is on record. And then, exactly 1 week later, after he has been back in communication with his family, after the financial machinery of the Duggar empire has been activated, after Jim Bob has engaged attorneys, Joseph pleads not guilty. Think about that timeline for a second. 1 week. 1 week between a confession and a not guilty plea. And the variable that changes everything in that 1 week is access to the family network and their money. Because the moment Jim Bob starts paying for the legal team, the narrative shifts. The victim's family, the people who reported what happened, the people who cooperated with law enforcement because a crime was committed against someone they love, are no longer treated as people who were wronged. They become the enemy, completely recast, overnight. Enemy of the family, enemy of the faith, traitors to everything they supposedly stand for. And nowhere is this reframing more chilling than in what happens with Kendra's own parents. Back in 2021, Joseph and Kendra gifted her parents a house. It was a gesture that, at the time, probably looked like generosity, like taking care of family, like the kind of thing you point to when you want to demonstrate that these people are good, that their values produce goodness. But Kendra's parents reported Joseph to the police. They cooperated with law enforcement. They did what the law requires, what basic moral decency requires, when they became aware of what had happened. And so, in the middle of this active legal crisis, Kendra is working with the Duggar family to evict her own parents from that house. Not reluctantly, not with visible anguish or conflict. She is laughing about it on these recorded calls, giggling. There is an audible lightness in her voice as she discusses legally punishing her own family for cooperating with a criminal investigation. Now, the easy reaction to that is horror, and it is horrifying. But if you stop at horror, you miss the more important analysis, which is, how does a person get there? How does a human being arrive at a place where laughing about evicting your own parents feels not just acceptable, but righteous? The answer is theology. Specifically, the theology of the Institute in Basic Life Principles, the IBLP, and the ATI homeschooling curriculum that this family and others like them were raised on. Because in that theological framework, what Kendra's parents did was not just a personal betrayal, it was a cosmic one. They took information about the family and handed it to the secular world. They let outsiders in. And in the IBLP worldview, that is not a complicated moral act that requires weighing competing obligations. It is treason, pure and simple. Her parents crossed to the other side, and in doing so, they removed themselves from the circle of people whose well-being Kendra is obligated to care about. That laugh is not cruelty. Well, it is cruel, but it is also conditioning. It is what happens when decades of teaching have successfully replaced a person's natural instinct for family loyalty with an entirely different loyalty structure. One where the institution comes first, always, and anyone who threatens the institution is automatically an adversary. And this rejection of the outside world does not stop at legal accountability. It extends, and this is where things become genuinely dangerous for Kendra personally, into medicine. Because throughout these calls, Kendra's physical state is alarming. She describes extreme fatigue, constant nausea, vomiting so persistent she cannot keep food down. She's taking Benadryl to knock herself unconscious just so she can sleep. She's relying on IV fluids for basic hydration because her body is breaking down under the stress of this crisis. And the obvious response, the response that anyone operating outside this system would immediately reach for is, go see a doctor. Go talk to someone. Get help. But she does not do that. She cannot do that, not really, not in any meaningful way. Because the theology she was raised in, the Bill Gothard teachings embedded in the IBLP curriculum, explicitly teaches that secular doctors and psychologists are not just unhelpful, but actively evil. And it goes further than that. The curriculum teaches that physical illness is frequently the result of secret, unconfessed sin. There is a genuinely documented example in their source material where a broken ankle is taught as a consequence of the sin of lust. A broken ankle from lust. Now that sounds absurd on its face, and it is absurd. But when you apply that theological logic to a woman who is vomiting daily, who cannot sleep without sedatives, whose body is physically collapsing under extreme psychological stress, what it means is that seeking outside medical help is not just frowned upon, it is a confession of spiritual failure. It signals to everyone around her and to herself that she is harboring sin, that her body's distress is her own moral fault. So she suffers, and she suffers publicly within the family's view, which has its own utility for the people managing this crisis. Because a woman who is sick, exhausted, isolated, and terrified is not a woman who is going to push back. She is not going to ask hard questions. She is not going to suddenly decide that maybe cooperating with law enforcement is the right thing to do. She's going to reach for whoever offers her a lifeline. And the Duggar family is standing right there, lifeline in hand. But here is the thing about that lifeline. It does not come without strings. Nothing in this system ever does. Kendra describes to Joseph how the family has essentially organized itself into what she calls departments. There is a department handling the children, a department managing the attorneys, a department overseeing the family businesses, and a department specifically assigned to manage her. Let that land for a moment. Her. Not supporting her, not comforting her, managing her. She is a department. In the crisis management structure of her own in-laws, she is a problem to be administered. And the specifics of what that administration looks like are extraordinary. They are orchestrating the minutiae of her daily life. They are directing her to sell personal items so that she can generate a documented paper trail of income that will show CPS, the Child Protective Services evaluators, that she has financial independence and stability. They are scripting her responses. They are coaching her presentation. Michelle Duggar personally attends a DCFS meeting to speak on Kendra's behalf, effectively managing the story that state investigators receive. This is not a family rallying around one of their own out of love. This is a crisis communications firm executing damage control on behalf of a brand. The brand just happens to be a family, and the thing they are protecting is not Kendra, not the children, not the truth. It is a fortress. It is the decades of carefully constructed image, financial structures, legal protections, and institutional power that Jim Bob Duggar has spent his life building. And Kendra, in her sick, exhausted, isolated state, is both a tool in that defense and a liability that needs to be carefully managed. We left off talking about how the Duggar family organized itself into departments to manage Kendra while Joseph sat in jail. We talked about how Kendra's physical collapse was being exploited rather than addressed. We talked about how the victim's family was recast as the enemy almost overnight. But there is a layer underneath all of that. A deeper current running through every single one of these 13 recorded calls. And it only becomes fully visible when you look at what Joseph is doing to Kendra psychologically, in real time, on these tapes. Because Joseph is not just a man sitting in jail waiting for his legal team to do their work. He is actively, deliberately, and with remarkable precision using these $6 20-minute phone calls to maintain psychological control over his wife from behind bars. And the tool he uses to do it is the one thing she cannot question: her faith. There is a moment in these transcripts that stopped me cold when I first read it. Kendra mentions to Joseph, almost carefully, almost like she is testing how he will react, that she has started seeing a counselor. Now, for anyone outside this world, that is straightforwardly good news. A woman under catastrophic stress, whose body is physically breaking down, who is completely isolated from any outside support, finding a counselor is exactly the right move. It is a healthy move. It is what any caring person in Joseph's position would encourage. Joseph does not encourage it. But here is the sophisticated part. He does not forbid it either. He does not say, "Do not go." He does not issue a direct command. Because a direct command would be too visible. It would be too easy to identify as control. Instead, he opens his Bible. He brings up the book of Exodus, specifically the story of Moses, Aaron, and the golden calf. He tells Kendra about how Aaron lacked good personal boundaries, how Aaron was too easily influenced by the people around him, how Aaron let others walk all over him, which is what allowed him to be manipulated into building the golden idol, an act of profound betrayal against God. And then he contrasts Aaron with Moses. Moses, who stood firm. Moses, who had strong boundaries and was not swayed by outside influence. Moses, who remained loyal to God even when everyone around him was being corrupted. He is not teaching his wife scripture. He is not offering comfort or spiritual guidance. He is issuing a warning. Coded in theology, wrapped in the language of faith, but unmistakably a warning. The counselor is the corrupting influence. The counselor is the Israelites demanding the idol. And if Kendra talks openly to that counselor, if she tells the truth about their marriage, about the dynamics inside their home, about what she knows and what she has seen, she is Aaron. She is the weak one. She is the one without boundaries who let outside influence corrupt her loyalty to God. Staying silent, withholding information, keeping the family's secrets, even from a mental health professional, that is Moses. That is strength. That is faithfulness. This is what spiritual abuse looks like at its most sophisticated. It does not come with raised voices or explicit threats. It comes with a Bible story and a gentle reminder about the importance of having good personal boundaries. And Kendra, who has been conditioned her entire life to read Scripture as the ultimate authority on how to live, receives that message exactly as it was intended. The counselor becomes a threat to her spiritual integrity rather than a resource for her survival. Joseph is terrified, not in jail, not of the legal consequences bearing down on him. He is terrified that Kendra will tell the truth to someone who is legally obligated to act on it, a mandated reporter, a secular professional outside the family's reach, someone whose loyalty cannot be purchased or managed or organized into a department. So he uses the one key that has always unlocked her compliance, her faith, her genuine, deeply held, lifelong faith, and he turns it into a gag order. But the psychological manipulation happening inside these calls is only one piece of what is unfolding. Because from the outside, another set of players suddenly enters the picture. And their arrival is so unexpected and so strategically timed that it shifts the entire atmosphere of these recordings almost instantly. Josh Duggar and his wife Anna. Now, if you know the full scope of the Duggar story, you know that Josh has been largely estranged from the younger siblings. There is a social, emotional, situational distance that developed over years. His presence in Joseph and Kendra's life was not a regular, ongoing thing. And yet, suddenly, in the middle of this active crisis, Anna begins emailing Joseph. She starts funding his commissary account. She is paying for the expensive phone and video calls, the very calls we are analyzing right now. She is pouring money and attention into a brother-in-law she has not been closely connected to. Why? She attaches the answer directly to the money. In the very first email, before anything else, Anna delivers a single sentence that rewrites the entire emotional landscape of these calls. She writes, "None of this is confidential." That is it. 4 words. But those 4 words do something devastating. They puncture the bubble. They force the reality of the secular justice system directly into the insulated world Joseph and Kendra have been operating in. They are a reminder, blunt, deliberate, impossible to misread, that every single word spoken on these lines is being recorded and can be used. And you can actually track in the transcripts the exact moment that message lands. Before Anna's email, Joseph and Kendra are operating with a kind of careless intimacy. They are talking like people who believe they are protected. They are sharing things, processing things, moving through their crisis with the assumption that the family circle is a safe space. After that email, everything changes. The casual conversation disappears. It is replaced by a clipped, guarded, almost paranoid quality. They begin talking about not trusting anyone. They specifically name an attorney, Gregory Payne, someone who had previously worked alongside the legal team on Josh's own appeal case, and warn each other to avoid him. They are sealing every hatch, locking every door, suddenly acutely aware that they have been speaking freely on monitored lines and that the damage of that may already be done. The paranoia that sets in is palpable, even through the transcript pages. So why does Josh get involved at all? What is the actual motivation driving the sudden flood of money and attention from a man who has been largely absent from his younger siblings' lives? The answer, when you look at it clearly, has nothing to do with family loyalty or brotherly love. It has everything to do with what Joseph knows. Joseph Duggar has spent his entire life inside the inner circle of one of America's most scrutinized families. He knows things, intricate financial things, about how the family's businesses and properties are structured, employment arrangements that may not withstand outside examination, and most critically, past cover-ups, previous incidents of abuse within the family that were handled internally, quietly, in ways that were never meant to face the light of a criminal investigation or a civil lawsuit. Josh knows the architecture of those secrets better than almost anyone, and he knows that a desperate man sitting in a jail cell, watching his family being dismantled by state investigators, facing serious charges, is a man who might start talking, a man who might decide that cooperation looks better than loyalty, a man who might pick up one of those monitored phone lines and say something that unravels decades of carefully maintained silence. The commissary money is not generosity. It is an investment. It is the cost of keeping someone quiet who has the power to do enormous damage if they stop being quiet. And the family organizing into departments around Kendra does not care. It is containment. It is the management of a potential liability. A young woman who is sick, isolated, talking to a secular counselor, and married to a man who just confessed to a crime. Every department, every coached response, every scripted interaction with state investigators, every intervention at a DCFS meeting, all of it is designed to control the story that reaches the outside world. Jim Bob Duggar has spent decades building a fortress, and right now, that fortress is under the most serious assault it has ever faced. Every resource at his disposal, financial, legal, theological, relational, is being deployed not to address what happened, not to support the victim, not to ensure the safety of children, but to protect the institution. That is the through line of every single one of these 13 calls. Institution over individual, brand over truth, fortress over everything. And here is where I want you to sit with something that does not get talked about enough in these kinds of stories: the children. In all of this, in the crisis management departments and the legal maneuvering and theological manipulation and the hush money and the eviction proceedings against Kendra's own parents, the children are almost entirely absent as human beings. They appear in these conversations, yes, but they appear as variables. They appear as elements of the problem to be managed. Kendra describes them as her lost purpose, which we talked about in part 1, this language of purpose, of pouring into vessels, that strips them of their independent humanity and reframes them as extensions of her identity and her role. The family's departments are managing the children. There are people assigned to handle them, but handling is not the same as seeing them. Handling is not the same as asking what they are experiencing, what they have witnessed, what they need in order to feel safe. Michelle Duggar attends a DCFS meeting to advocate for Kendra's parental competency. But parental competency in this context is not being evaluated on the basis of whether Kendra genuinely understands the danger her children may have been in. It is being performed. It is a presentation designed to satisfy state requirements so that the children can be returned to the family's custody and the institutional crisis can be resolved. The children are props in a state evaluation. They are the metric by which the family's success at damage control will ultimately be measured. If they come home, the departments work. If they do not, the strategy fails. Their actual emotional state, their trauma, their future, none of that appears in these transcripts with any real weight. It is eclipsed entirely by the adults' desperate need to protect the fortress. And that is not just tragic. It is the clearest possible window into how these systems perpetuate themselves across generations. Because children raised inside this kind of managed reality, children whose pain is never the central concern, children who are handled rather than seen. Those children grow up learning that institutions matter more than individuals, that loyalty to the group supersedes personal truth, that outsiders are threats, that suffering in silence is strength. And the cycle continues. There is a question that these transcripts leave hanging in the air, and I do not think it has a comfortable answer. But I think it is the most important question we can take away from all of this. If our child protection systems, the DCFS evaluations, the parental competency assessments, the mandated reporter frameworks, all of it, if those systems can be coached around, scripted around, managed around by a family with sufficient resources, theological sophistication, and institutional knowledge about how secular investigations work, then how does the state ever actually protect the children inside these systems? Because what we see in these transcripts is not a family that failed to understand the requirements of state oversight. It is a family that understands those requirements precisely well enough to perform compliance with them while systematically undermining their purpose. They know what DCFS needs to see. They manufacture it. They script it. They send Michelle Duggar into the room to manage the narrative. And this is not unique to the Duggar family. High-control religious groups communities built on the foundational premise that the outside world is corrupt and that its systems are spiritually dangerous have been doing this for as long as those systems have existed. The theology does not just insulate them from accountability. It actively prepares them to engage with accountability in ways that neutralize it. When you believe that lying to outsiders in defense of your community is not just permitted, but righteous, when you believe that legal consequences are spiritual attacks rather than the natural result of harmful actions, when you believe that secular professionals are tools of corruption rather than people trying to help you, are not operating inside the same reality as the laws designed to protect children. And the laws, the evaluators, the investigators, are largely not equipped to deal with that gap. They are built for a world where bad actors are trying to hide what they did. They are not built for a world where bad actors have a theologically coherent framework that redefines what they did as not bad in the first place. That is the wall these transcripts run into over and over again. And until we start having serious, honest conversations about how child protection systems engage with high-control religious communities, children inside those communities will continue to be the ones who pay the price. So here is where we land. 13 phone calls from a jail cell. 13 windows into a system under pressure. And what those windows reveal is not what the family's carefully managed public image would ever allow you to see. You see a woman who is conditioned to define her entire worth through her role, now physically collapsing under stress and being managed rather than helped. You see a man using scripture as a weapon to silence his wife from behind bars. You see a family recast a victim's loved ones as enemies within days of an arrest. You see hush money dressed up as family support. You see a corporate crisis management structure operating under the name of love and faith and community. And underneath all of it, barely visible through the noise of adult self-preservation, you see children, real children, whose safety, whose trauma, whose future are treated as secondary concerns in a game the adults around them are playing to protect something that was never worth protecting in the first place. The image, the brand, the fortress, none of it was ever real. These tapes prove it. If this video made you think, if it made you angry, if it gave you language for something you have been trying to understand, share it. That is how this kind of content reaches the people who need it most. Hit the like button if you want YouTube to show this to more people. Subscribe to Jenny Exposes so you never miss a deep dive like this one. And drop a comment below. I genuinely read them, and I want to know what part of this hit hardest for you. This channel exists to pull back the curtain on the stories that deserve more than a headline. And as long as you are here watching, we are going to keep doing exactly that. I will see you in the next one.